All right, Brian, you're good. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Hey, Brian B here. I want to say a couple thank yous before I start. I want to thank Dawn for inviting me to speak. She is a pretty monumental person in my life and certainly in my sobriety. So I deeply want to thank her. I want to thank Stephanie for hosting and all who do service for Dopey. Um, and I want to thank Dopey. The the podcast and the Facebook page have have both been just kind of endless well springs of inspiration for me. And again, I want to thank Dawn because she invited me to the group, and I want to thank everybody that's on this meeting tonight. I hope I say something that is of service, useful. My sobriety date is August 11th of 2019. So in a month and change, I will hit 3 years of continuous sobriety. And for me, the solution was in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to say before I share my story that Dopey has opened my eyes to what alt recovery means. And I am 100% in favor of anything that anyone feels that they can do safely that will allow them to not do the thing that they don't feel they can do safely. So get that out of the way and out in front. All right, so uh, you know, I was uh, I was a huge liar when I was a kid. I would lie about anything just to make my life sound more exciting than it actually was. I don't know where I got the idea that my life was boring, but I thought that it was. And I can tell an excellent lie in the moment, but I'm not a good liar because I forget to whom I told which lie. And then it's just a web of lies, and I end up mixing up my lies and I get caught by everybody. I don't think I've gotten away with one lie. So that was early on before, I don't know, before I was ever thinking about alcohol. And and I definitely had a feeling of kind of being an outsider. My parents were, blue collar people that said that wanted something better for me, and they said, you have to get straight A's. Um, they didn't teach me how to get straight A's. They just said that that's what I had to do, and that's what I did. And I learned to cheat early on. I was a cheater. I was a liar and a cheater. And I cheated up until, I guess, junior year of college. I was cheating in such elaborate ways. I was spending so much more time cheating than I would had to have spent studying and learning the material. And I tell that to my students now. I am a teacher. I say, listen, man, I've done it all. I've seen it all. I see you cheat on my tests. I'm not going to fail you, but I will tell you this. Eventually, it gets more complex than actually learning the material. So it took me a long time to learn that. I started drinking when I was in uh, the very first time I was asked to qualify at an AA meeting. I wrote notes on an iPad, and I went up in front of everybody with an iPad, and I turned it on, and I never looked at it once. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was something that I had completely forgotten. But when I got in front of the people, it just spilled out of me, and it was this. The first time I got drunk, my brother was having a party. He was in ninth grade, so that puts me in seventh grade. And I went downstairs. Everybody was like out back getting fucked up. My mom and dad were at the movies. And it's like, that's not a lot of time. I mean, maybe they were going to get a nightcap after. I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like it's a lot of time to have a party. But it was a throwdown party. I snuck downstairs and I drank. And then I got the girl across the street who I knew liked me to come over my house under the guise of we were both reptile enthusiasts, and I had a couple reptiles under the guise of seeing my new chameleon. I brought her up to my bedroom, and we had a sexual experience. And I after it happened, I remember I felt complete like shame. And it must have been because it was predicated on a lie. I like I constructed this experience and predicated it on a lie. And after that happened, this girl was way cool. She wanted to uh, I don't know, continue the relationship, or just talk about it, or just do what you're supposed to do in a relationship, communicate. I completely ghosted this person. I did not talk to her. When it came back to me that this happened, I completely denied it. 100% denied it. It caused me so much anguish and guilt and shame. Unbelievable. I mean, just unbelievable. Quick fast forward. The first amends that I made in AA. I'm still on step 9 after freaking 2 years, but she was the first amends. When I shared that, serendipity called, because I saw her, like, she became my friend on Facebook, or she friended me on Facebook out of the blue, like, directly after this share and this qualification. And I wrote her a message and said that I'm working through the steps of AA. And she said that she didn't feel that it was necessary, but if it was necessary for me to move on in my sobriety, then she would entertain the call. Called her, we talked about that, and just basically, just old times and stuff. But and it was a good amends for me. There were some bad ones, and that maybe I'll get into those, because those are the reasons why I'm finding it hard to move on. But that very first experience with alcohol, from the get go, out of the gate, lies and deceit and sexual misconduct. Not even misconduct. I mean, if it was consensual, I just couldn't. I just I just couldn't put it in a way that I couldn't think of it in a way that was healthy. Um, so drinking started through high school. I was a blackout drunk from the beginning. I would drink with my brother and his friends. My brother's 2.5 years older than me. He'd be running around trying to get the drink out of my hand. I'd end up skinny dipping with his friends. Have no recollection of it. Um, I'd be crying like in a Burger King parking lot with you just yeah, with people trying to cheer me up and not understanding why. Move on to college. Oh man, in college, I I started to do drugs, and hallucinogens were my drug of choice. And yeah, my friend and I would try to recount all the trips we'd been on, and by our calculations, we were both well into the 500 hit club, and uh, I would take a sugar cube of acid on the train ride home. I was living at home for a while, commuting to Temple. I was living outside of Philly, and I would be super tired, and I would love to take a sugar cube, at the beginning of the train ride, and so then I would wake up tripping on the train. I thought that was really entertaining and exciting. Um, we used to drip liquid acid in our eyeballs and stuff. It totally just cooked my brain, fried it to the extent where I was seeing trails when I was sober, when I was not using, and every time I would trip, I would go down the same mental corridors. It would just be like clockwork. Um, it no longer had the same adventure and the same. It didn't really open that door to the divine anymore, and I had to quit, and I did, which is amazing because I couldn't quit cocaine, and I couldn't quit alcohol. So there was some kind of self-preservation thing with the LSD. um, and that was I got into bands. I'm a musician, and I got into bands, rock bands, and waltzed dropped out of college the first go around because it didn't fit in with my lifestyle. My new lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And I became a bike messenger in Philly, and great community, great community of riders in Philadelphia. But I mean, my using went off the charts, and I became I became I just like I couldn't separate the creativity from the drugs and alcohol. They were so intertwined. I couldn't like I thought that people who wrote music were on drugs, and they wrote it for other people who were on drugs. So I would, even when I was not on drugs, I would think of how something would feel if I was on drugs, especially anything auditory, anything oral. Uh, and it just became such, the drugs, alcohol, and the music became so bonded that in West Philadelphia, the scene in the 90s was so incestuous. It was just groups of musicians like banding together under a drug umbrella. It's just like these people are safe to use with. It was such an empowering experience, but at the same time, it was just, you know, it could be looked at as just kind of like this fearful umbrella. It's like we got it. Oh, the cat just jumped up on me here. We have to, we have to stay together so we can do this. We can keep feeding this beast, and that's what it became. Feeding the beast for sure. Um, I was disdainful of organized religion. filled with contempt prior to investigation. I used to sing. Made my money as a singer for a while. I used to sing in a church, and I mean, most of the time I would go in there after a night of just severe debauchery, and then try to, sing these sacred songs. I was the first one to rail against organized religion. If you were a born again Christian, I would make any attempt to make you cry because of your beliefs. And it a lot of times it worked. Sometimes it got me punched in the face, but you know, I think I made more people cry than punched me in the face. And my whole deal was leave them angrier than they left you. You know, just if you're gonna fuck with me, then I'm just gonna have to make your life just a little bit worse, and then I win. Uh, my depressive cycles were long, and my creative cycles were short. But I thought that I'm living the life of a creative musician, and that's what it's supposed to be like. You're supposed to have these bursts of creativity followed by intense depression and just malaise. And the drugs and the alcohol fed those cycles in the worst ways possible. Um, in 2005, I rode my bicycle across the country, and uh, and then I moved to New York City. So people in Philly don't usually move. It's just like a thing. But I moved. I made it out. I made it out, and now I'm back in Philly. It was a 15-year New York odyssey that took me through. That took me through. It took me through Manhattan, Lower East Side, then Chinatown. Then uh, it took me to Brooklyn, then to Bushwick, which is also in Brooklyn, and then and then to Westchester for about 5 years until I threw in the towel on my New York experience. But the geographical helped. I had some moments of clarity up in New York. I became a teacher in New York. I somehow got a degree from Brooklyn College, a mathematics education degree. Because by the end of that deal, I was, I had all my phone. My phone was restocked with numbers of new dealers, but the geographical held me for about a year, maybe two, and New York was so intensely cool. But the same old behaviors started to show, and I really had no defense because I didn't have any tools to deal with depression. I had never seen a therapist at that point. I had no I had no God of my understanding at that point. I was still riding just waves of anger. The energy that it gave me powered me through my days. I was blessed with a lot of patience I guess, as a person, so it helped me as a teacher. And I thought that I would have that forever, and I was wrong. Because after my 6th year of teaching, my using cycles were getting dangerously just, I was using during work, and and um, I had a dream that I shot one of my students in the back twice and killed them, I started to think that maybe teaching was the wrong profession for me. And things got bad. There was one day that sticks out in my New York City public school tenure, and I was using OxyContin during school and mixing it with cocaine. Um, and one day, just I guess the mix and the timing of the mix, it just walloped me, and I fell into like a deep, deep sleep in a chair in the middle of my classroom. My classroom had two exits. It was in the attic. It was a huge room. I was a band instructor and concert band, and a kid woke me up and said, "Mr. Baker, everybody's about to come up from lunch." And I was like, "What? What?" I totally didn't know where I was, and I I started to come back to reality and kind of like put the pieces together. I'm like, oh, I'm at work, and I got okay, okay, it's lunch. I know who this kid is. And then he said, "Yeah, Mr. Baker, make sure you pick up your medication before the kids show up." And I look on the ground, and my my baggie of OxyContin was on the ground with like one of the pills kind of on the floor and a couple other ones still in the bag. Oh man, that I I just it that just shredded me, and then on the heels of that was the dream, and of course I had a VP who was, I no called no showed for 13 days that final year, and she took me into her office after I came back and said, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I said, "Yeah, but she said, "Do you want to go to treatment?" And I said, "No." I was using my parents' sickness. My mother had lung cancer. My dad he had heart issues at that time, I think. Oh, and he started to suffer from dementia. I used their illness, and I would just take off. I would just take off. I said, "Oh yeah, this could be it. That they th- they might die. My dad might die. My mom might die. They weren't going to die. The, they were they were sick, and they were doing the best they could to fight the illness, and the prognosis was good. I was just using that. I used both of my grandfather's deaths to withdraw from whole semesters of college the first time around. I had never met either of my grandfathers. They were both dead before I was born. But I felt entitled to use their deaths to just get me out of a withdrawal fail. I mean, fuck. I mean, so privileged and self-centered. I mean, it's really hard to look back, and it's hard to take, and it's hard to see it for what it was. And it's hard to forgive myself. But in the last 3 years, I've begun to do just that. To do the work that it takes to forgive myself for that. And so that puts me in at the end of my public school tenure in New York City, and I went on private tutoring for a bunch of about 5 years. One of my really bad amends was the amends to my tutoring employer, because I started my own tutoring service, and I stole all the clients that I had for that company, thinking that these two owners of the company are rich, and yeah, this is how business starts. And the no compete clause that I signed, that shouldn't mean crap. And when I told my direct boss what I had done, and she wanted names of the clients that I stole, and I gave her the names I could remember, and just, yeah, she was so crushed. She went to bat for me a bunch of times, and that pretty much shattered me in step 9 and made me really gun shy. Um, I did just reach out to an old employer of mine that still runs the courier business here in Philly, and I said that I needed to make an amends, and he's like, no, you don't. We were all drunks. We were all doing drugs. Don't worry about it. I said, no, I said, if you would let me, it would help me because I need to let this guilt go. And and I said, and I also want you to be in my life again because this guy was a really, really good friend. So he agreed, and we're gonna make a ninth step amends soon. So I get into AA and I relapse every summer because I'm a teacher. And I originally thought that sponsors were people that you could just complain and bitch to. And that's what their job was, to like listen to you fucking vent. And I got told in certain terms and uncertain terms that no, that's not what sponsors are for. Um, every time I got to step 4, I would go out again and say, fuck this program, I'm not doing this. Um, then my ex-wife told me if I didn't, my mother passed away. I was a complete wreck. I was drunk the whole time on whiskey. She was in hospice for 2 weeks. I was drinking and replacing fifths of whiskey at our cousin's house daily and apologizing daily for doing so. And after that, I felt like, well, my wife hit me with an ultimatum and said, if you keep drinking, I'm going to divorce you. And I thought how unjust that was on the heels of my mother's death for this person who supposedly loves me to then tell me that I can't do the only thing that takes the pain away. So I started white knuckling it, almost got a year 3 times, and then went back out. Relapsed about, I guess, 6 times total. So, if you're new and you're relapsing out there, to come back. Every time you come back, it's a fucking miracle. And I am a person who was dead set against miracles. What an overused term in recovery. But it's better to believe in miracles than not to believe in miracles for me. And I started to believe in them. I got sober in Westchester, New York, and and I've had a couple really great sponsors. Um, I go to meetings every day if I can, and I do service. I pray. I try to pray morning and night. Most of the time, I get the morning done. At night, sometimes I just collapse. But even if I can say thank you to my higher power at the end of the day, that's an excellent prayer. I am a spiritual person. I I didn't have problems with a higher power existing. My problem lay in the thought that my higher power, or a higher power, any higher power knows who the fuck I am, and forget about having a plan for me. The plan, I mean, just the fact that I can pray to a higher power. I'm getting to that part where it's like I believe that the universe has something better for me. I'm getting there. I'm making progress there. I have a therapist, and I highly value that part of my recovery. I I have days of self care where I go to Pilates. I get body work. I get massage. These are very important parts of my recovery as well. So it's the spiritual, the physical, and the mental. And if you can address all three on a given day, at least once, hopefully multiple times for the spiritual, then you're really doing something. I find it hard to make my spirituality continuous. It's very compartmentalized for me. Okay, now I'm praying, and now I'm living my life. Living my life and being spiritual are two separate entities. Uh, yeah, this I'm struggling. I'm struggling with this, and you know, some people are nice, and they're so nice that it makes me sick. And I don't want to be a person who is sickened by kindness. I want to be a person who is kind, but I don't want to be that person. But I should want to be that person. Yeah, I'm like, I'm getting there. I'm getting there, and I'm being shown the truth in these microscopic doses, right? I'm getting shown the amount of truth that I can handle on a given day because I can't handle the truth. I can't. I can handle a little tiny bit of it, a little tiny bit more of it every day. And luckily for me, AA and certainly Dopey is okay with that. And so that's what I do to stay sober. And once again, I'm grateful to be here, grateful to get to tell my story, and would love to hear from you all. So peace and love to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to try to figure out if I can stop it recording. There we go.